So, welcome everyone, and today we're going to talk about a very unique vessel that we read about its construction last week. And I'll show you a picture of the vessel and ask you what is unique about it. So, it's the basin called Kiol, and um, let's read the verses. Two questions arise when we look at this vessel.
Copper.
Yeah, well, that's a big machlokes, really. What was it made out of between the
Mm.
translations? So we'll see that in a second. That's a good point. So I put the first three Hebrew words, Vasita kio nechoshet. So Aaron, what's nechoshet in modern Hebrew?
It's it's either bronze or copper. I don't remember.
Right. So yeah, I grew up, speaking Hebrew, so nechoshet was always copper. Um, and let's read the verses and then talk just for a bit about was it bronze or was it copper? So a volunteer to read the verses.
Okay, you are to make a basin of bronze, its pedestal of bronze for washing, and you are to put it between the tent of appointment and the altar. You are to put water therein, and let Aaron and his sons wash their hands and feet in water drawn from it. They shall wash their hands and feet that they may not die.
Okay. So first of all, what is it made out of? And this is a translation of the Shaken Bible, but the version that we use, the JPS version, they have copper. And I really can't tell you what is correct. What I remember from chemistry class and is that pure copper, is very hard to extract pure copper, very expensive. And bronze is an alloy. So I think that's why he chose Professor Everett Fox, who is the Shaken Bible. Uh, I think that's why he chose bronze. Um, but it, I don't know how I can't really decide who is more correct. In modern Hebrew, we have a different word for bronze. The one that they give in the Olympics. We call that arad,
Oh, God, yes,
right?
yes.
Arad. But that's modern Hebrew. We can't extrapolate from modern Hebrew to biblical Hebrew. You really need to be an expert archaeologist to know whether it was copper or bronze. And I think both. So let's just agree to disagree. In other words, they will agree. The two versions, the JPS will disagree with Shaken Bible. Each will have their translation. I chose here to show you
But
the Shak.
remembering chemistry,
Yeah,
or vaguely, it, bronze is an alloy.
right.
It's not it. Copper is something pure. I remember it had a, what do you call it? Everybody help me, a chemical number or something. But bronze doesn't. Bronze requires human doing something to it, right?
Yeah, but I think that makes it cheaper and more available. So in terms of they're in the desert, how can they have access to large amounts of copper? I think it makes more sense that they mixed it up with other, like you say, it's an alloy. So maybe that's why he chose it, Professor Fox in the Shocking Bible, because it's more logical that they wouldn't have such an expensive element, copper. But and make mirrors out of it because we're going to see that right here there's nothing about how to get that bronze/copper, right? There's nothing about it, but already there's something unique already, and it's very different than all the other vessels. I want to show you, compare and contrast. So here are um, three different vessels. So take a moment to look at him. On your right, the red, that's our basin, that's our kiol. How is that different than the altar of incense and the table of showbread? Something jumps out, like that's missing from.
Are there
The
are there
measurement.
no are there no instructions to the size of the thing.
Excellent.
Right.
This is the only vessel that has no measurements. So how are they supposed to know how to make it?
Well, if the guy has big feet, you make it bigger.
So, and it's strange because the commandment is very specified in all the ark and the menorah and the table and the altars. And here it leaves it up to the architect, however you want to make it. So, let's see a video there was a reconstruction of the Mishkan and its vessels in a south of Israel in a park called Park Timna. So let's go and take a tour and see how they interpreted it. And really, they can't be wrong because there were no what?
Timnah is the mine where they mine copper, right?
Copper. Yeah. Right. They do mine copper there. Yes. So let's put on the sound, share the sound, and let's see just for a minute or two.
So this is the first thing we talked about because it's the first thing we saw. But it's actually not the first thing the priest would do. When they're entering, when you're entering, the first thing you'd see is the altar, but the first thing the priest actually had to do was actually at the wash basin. So here we have the wash basin. The wash basin was made of copper and does not actually have any measurements on it. Okay, no weight, no cubits. We actually don't know a lot about what it looked like. In the temple, we actually know a lot more about it because it has those measurements and it describes what it looked like. But here, we don't know exactly. We know that it contained water. The Levites would fill this with water. It was placed between the altar and the holy place. And this is where the priests would wash their hands and their feet before they needed to sacrifice or before they would enter into the building.
Okay, so you see their version is between the altar. This is where they would do the sacrifices and between the tents of meeting. And it makes sense. It looks that way, like that. It has a base. The Torah does say base. It has a base. But there's a second question that we need to ask about the placement of this commandment. So it's placed in a very strange place in the Torah. So let me show you what I mean by that. So all the vessels, the Aron, the Shulchan, the Menorah, the Kelim, are all the way back in Parshat Teruma. That's my Bar Mitzvah Parsha. So I remember that well. So we start with the beginning of God telling Moses, tell the Israel people to bring me gifts for every person whose heart is moved. These are the gifts. You see here, they also translated it, the choshet, as copper. At least they're consistent. And then they start the description. This is the ark. The next is the table of showbread. Then the menorah. You shall make a lampstand, what they call a lampstand. Then after that, we have the walls. Or cloths of goats as a tent. This is what the tent is actually made out of, cloths of goats. Then we have the walls made out of planks of acacia wood. Then we have the parochet. That's what we call today, what we open the ark, we call that parochet. It's modeled after this, how do they translate the word? You shall make a curtain, that's it. Yes. So a curtain that divided. Then we have a mizbeach, an altar. So all of them are lumped together. Then we go into other things about the miluim, the consecration of the Kohanim. There's a long description, the clothes they need to wear. And that's all of Parshat Tetzaveh. So that's hundreds of verses. I'm going through them. And after the end of the Parshat Tetzaveh, begins Kitisa, and there's a machatzita shekel, a half shekel, and then here it is. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, make a lever of copper, or a basin. I like to call it basin. Why is it separated from all the vessels? Why isn't it together with the table and the aron and the ark and the menorah and the walls and the altars? So our commentators immediately jumped on that, and let's see what they said. So they said that the reason that the Torah put it separate in a separate place in the whole entire, um, call it, I guess, corpus of tabernacle is that, um, here, let's read Rabbi Ovadiah's Forno. You shall make a basin. This is another vessel which has not been mentioned before with the other vessels that were part of the tabernacle. The reason is that the basin was not instrumental in attracting the presence of the Shekhinah to the tabernacle. Its function was merely preparatory to the priest service in the tabernacle. So I want to use this explanation also to explain the first question we had. Since it's not that important, it's not the way he phrases it, it doesn't attract the Shekhinah, then measurements are not important. If the other vessels is very important, these are divinely designed vessels to help the Shekhinah dwell among the people of Israel. Since this is only preparatory, then however the artist, wants it to look like, that's fine. I think that can be an explanation of why there are no measurements. Another explanation could be they didn't know the science of making round things the way they did later, because we're going to see that later in the Temple of Solomon. So we watched the video. Here's another version. I went to this place. It's in Pennsylvania. The Mennonites also did a reproduction. That's closer than Park Timna. It's cheaper to get there than to Park Timna. So if you want to see now I have to warn you, during the tour, they inject, their religion, and when they get into the inside, not here, not when they talk about the basin, they inject about Jesus and that. So at the end of their tour, but it's fairly neutral most of the throughout the whole tour, and so this is a slightly different version. I guess it's smaller, but we can't say that one is right and the other is wrong, since there were no measurements. But when we get to Solomon's temple, it's very interesting. There are measurements. So it's almost like out of thin air, right? How did Solomon know Dafka to make it? Let's read. Do we have a volunteer to read Solomon's basin?
Can you make it lower? Because there's stuff on the top on the screen. Okay. But in Solomon's temple, we have measurements. Then he made the sea basin cast metal, 10 cubits across from brim to brim, completely round. It was 5 cubits high, and it measured 30 cubits in circumference.
Okay. So here's my question. What is the ratio of the circumference to diameter, what we call pi, in this text?
Well,
So
30
it's
to 10, so 3
six
to
to
1.
one, isn't it?
It's what?
6 to 1.
Why 6? 30 to
30.
10.
3 to 1.
Yes, but you only measure half of the brim, no?
No, this is brim to brim is the diameter, right? Pi is defined as the ratio of the circumference to the diameter. D
Okay.
divided
So it's
what's the letter for circumference? By C. So
okay,
30
that's
divided
3.
by 10, we get 3. And which, when we know that actual pi is 3.141592, and it goes on forever. It's an irrational and transcendental number, right? It never repeats. The sequence of numbers never repeats, and it goes on forever. So it's a rough estimate. But what's interesting is that for the first time we do have measurements. And it's really the only place in Tanakh where we can get an idea of how they rounded up pi to make it pi equals 3. But I wanted to show you it looks completely different than the one in the tabernacle. I would describe it as very accessible and simple and modest, right? Not extravagant. Now watch this. somebody did a reconstruction of Solomon's basin. It's a whole different ballgame. And it's based on the text. I only showed you one verse. If you look at all the other verses, then here it is.
Southeast side of the temple was the molten or brazen sea, which rested on the backs of 12 oxen, 3 pointing in each of the cardinal directions. In ancient times, oxen represented strength, and the number 12 often represented the 12 tribes of Israel. Water from the larger brazen sea was poured into 10 bronze water basins on both sides of the temple, which could then be wheeled around the outer court for various washing and cleansing rituals by the priests. Around the south, west, and north sides of
Okay. So you see, now it's all about showing off affluence and extravaganza, and I mean, like totally different than what we saw before, right? Than that simple, modest Park Timna one. And I think that comes with power. People have power. Solomon had power, had wealth, and he's like, I need the whole world to see this. And it's almost counterintuitive to what the Torah wanted to be in the temple. But he couldn't restrain himself. He had the money, he had the manpower, he had all those slaves working for him, and he had the architects to do it. So
Yeah,
he
it wasn't just Solomon, it was the priests. They were also basically, showing off who they were.
good point. Yeah, yeah, to show how special they are. So I think it's just natural. It's a human tendency that we see playing out here. Not sure this is what the Torah meant when the Torah commanded this vessel. But let's get back to there's other unique things about this vessel, about the kiyol. So let's continue. When it was made, there's a very interesting verse. Here's when it was made. So this was last week's parsha. Vayaset hakiyol nechoshet v'et kano nechoshet. Okay, so that's fairly sticking to what the Torah said you should do. Make it out of bronze and also to make the base from bronze. And then the Torah adds, b'marot tzovot asher tzav'u petach ohel moed. So now suddenly we have also not just the material, but how the material got to the tabernacle. Who brought that material? And it's telling us, and it's the only vessel that we have this information, that it was from the mirrors of the women, tzovot, who tzav'u at the door of the tent of meeting. You see clearly the connection between the noun, how these women are called tzovot, and the verb, they did this thing. They called tzav'u at the tent of the meeting. So we need to find out what that word means. It's so critical here. So if you look at the root, what root do you see from the root here?
Tzavah.
Tzavah. So here's my question. Are these, okay, so we know, mar'ot are mirrors. Okay, that comes from the root ra'ah. And we know there were mirrors. But the root tzavah, and it comes from Akkadian, the root tzavah means military. So was it this? But without the Uzis. Okay. Are these the women? These were fighter women? So no. We're so used to the modern Hebrew meaning of tzavah that we forget that in the Bible it has another meaning. So the meaning in the Bible is to gather. So to gather and perform work, to perform work. So for example, there is a rule about the age of the Levites, when they can begin their service in the temple and when they need to retire. So it's 30 to 50. And in that verse, you'll see, Kol haba litzvot tzavah la'avod avodah be'ohel moed. So clearly, this is not military. They're coming to perform service at the tent of meeting, be'ohel moed. So obviously, has nothing to do with fighting. And so we see now another meaning. So maybe this is what these women were doing. They were coming to do a certain service at the tent of meeting. But what kind of service? It's still very mysterious. What do you mean they were coming to do a service? They're just building it. It's the first time they're building the tabernacle. What service is there to be done yet? They haven't even started doing rituals there. So I understand if you would have told me they came to donate to you, if they would use the verb taram, truma, that would make sense. They have these mirrors and they felt they wanted to participate, like everybody's bringing gold and silver and copper and bronze. Okay, but the Torah doesn't say taram. The Torah uses the word tzovot. So what does that mean? So we look at different translations and we see that the JPS said performed tasks. And that fit the other verse that talked about the Levites. We see other Everett Fox, he translates from the mirrors of the women's working force that was doing the work at the entrance of the tent of appointment or tent of meeting. But they all are dodging the question. What work were they doing? So I want to pose it as a question. What do you think this women's working force were doing there?
Taking care of the men.
Well, but you know what? That's not a joke, in that was the role of women in other cultures of that time, that they hung around the entrance to the temple and they performed work of a sexual nature. And we're hoping that our women, that's not what they were doing.
Yeah. So actually, there is a verse in Samuel that talks exactly about that. But it's not the women's fault. It's the men, two corrupt priests who were abusing the women. Let's read the verse.
Oi.
Yeah. So this is in the book of Samuel, right after Samuel was born. The high priest is named Eli, and he has two sons, Hophni and Pinchas. And we have a volunteer to read the verse.
Okay, now Eli was very old when he heard all that his sons were doing to all Israel and how they lay with the ministering women who performed tasks at the entrance of the tent of meeting. So, oy vey.
Yeah. And then God talks to him and says, you're going to get punished. I'm going to wrestle the priesthood from you and the leadership from you because of how corrupt your sons are. So God is very, very angry at him. And you see in the Hebrew, Hanashim Hatzovot, Petach Oel Moed. And Professor Rachel Edelman says this is clearly a connection to the Nashim Hatzovot that we saw in our parsha, because it's the only place in the book of Samuel where the sanctuary there is called Ohel Moed. It had other names during the time of the judges. It had the name Heichal, and it had Mishkan, Shiloh. And so the prophet here, the scribe who wrote this, is using the phrase Ohel Moed, this phrase, connecting it to our parsha, because that's what we had in our parsha, that they came to the entrance of the Ohel Moed, of the tent of meeting. So clearly he's referencing back to the Nashim Hatzovot in our parsha, but in our parsha, there's no corrupt priests who are laying with women and abusing them. So what could be the connection? Perhaps this is women's empowerment. So in other words, her theory is that the idea of Nashim Tzovot was retrojected back into our parsha after this episode to show that they cannot just be victims. These women can actually be heroes. They can bring their own mirrors. They can donate and be productive in building the Mishkan. So this is a very nice idea that here they're victims, right? There's two corrupt priests, and they're taking advantages of these women. They're not. You see these women and you feel sorry for them, but they're not able to do anything about it. And then you go back to our verse. Let's go back, and you see the same b'marot hatzovot, and there now it's women who are donating and contributing to the Mishkan and helping to build this important vessel, which will be used by the priests every day to purify, ritually purify their hands and their feet. And so that's why, the Torah's author used these very unique verbs, tzovot, well, both the verb and the noun. This is the verb tzav'u and tzovot, to kind of do a women's empowerment thing and show that they're not just victims. That he was dissatisfied with how they're portrayed in the book of Samuel, and now he's showing us that they're the ones we can thank for willing to give up what is very dear to every woman, the mirror, right? And bring it to the, let's see the full the verse, and bring it to the tent of meeting. So this theory, I think it's a very it's a very interesting theory of inserting this very unique verb. It doesn't appear anywhere else in the building of the Mishkan. It appears later. We saw when the Levim are performing tasks. So it's almost like saying it's not just the Levite men who can be performing the important rituals. The women can do it too. And I'm going to put the same verb with the women here. Now, what kind of? It could be anything from weaving fabrics to cleaning to designing to being part of the artist, the cadre of artists who are involved. It's really about showing that they were an integral part of building the Mishkan. And
They
that's
were.
like, what?
Yeah, but were they counted in the minyan?
Ah, there you go. Yes.
Maybe Shammai, they were savu with the ayin.
Oh, painters. Yeah. I like
Yes,
that. Yeah, right. They needed to paint stuff in the tabernacle for sure, right? If you change the aleph to ayin, you get the verb for painting. I like that. Yeah, very good. So we'll end here, and I think it's a nice redeeming interpretation of this unique verse, this very mysterious verse.
Yeah.
After we saw all the negative stuff that happened in Samuel's time, to think that earlier, usually we say that progress is made when we go forward in time, but here maybe there's progress going backward in time, that the women in the tabernacle were treated much better and with much more respect than the women during the time of Samuel. So thank you all.
Was that Eli the priest? Was that the priest who basically blew off Hannah?
Yeah. It's the same priest.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
Thank you, Shammai.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Very good.
See you shortly, Shammai.
All right. Yeah.